All right, we're going to be working on lesson 10.4, which is working on radical equations. Okay, now there are two steps when we're solving a radical equation. The first step, we want to isolate the radical, and then once we have the radical isolated, we want to square both sides. So kind of zooming in here on our first example here. Okay, so we're going to solve for x. Now this is a typo, that shouldn't be there, so go ahead and take that out. Okay, so when we're looking at this, we want to solve for x, or solve for the variable. So we're going to isolate that guy right there first. So to isolate him, we're going to go ahead and have to multiply both sides by 2, so that the 2's will cancel. So we have the radical of x, and then we have 16 times 2, which is 32. Okay, so we've isolated the square root, and now to get rid of that square root, we're going to square both sides. So we end up with x equals, and we're going to go ahead and square 32 squared, and we're going to end up with 1024 when we type that in our calculator. Okay, all right, so let's go over the next example here. So example 2, again, we're going to isolate the square root first. So we're going to get this whole guy by itself first. So to start, we're going to go ahead and subtract the 2. Anything that's not inside the radical goes to the other side. So we have the radical of 4x minus 7 equals 5. Then we're going to square both sides. So 4x minus 7, because the square and square root are going to cancel each other out, equals 25. We're going to add the 7 over to the other side. So 4x equals 32, and then divide by 4. And x equals 8. Okay. All right, so if we go down here and just maybe look at another problem or two, so an example would be like number 6. Okay, so on number 6, the radical is already isolated, so you're just going to start by squaring both sides. So we get 3r squared equals 9. All right, so now the square root's gone, but now we're just going to solve for the variable, so we're going to divide by 3. So we have r squared equals 3. And then to get rid of that square root right there, we're going to have to go ahead and, to get rid of that square, we're going to have to go ahead and square root both sides. So r will equal, remember, anytime you take the square root of something, it's going to be plus or minus radical 3. All right, looking at number 7 real quickly. So in this case, we have a radical on both sides. So what we're going to look for is obviously we need to get the variable by itself. So since there's nothing over here, it's already isolated, we're going to go ahead and square both sides right away. So that cancels. We have y. And so now this is saying 2 root 3 times 2 root 3. Okay, so then multiply the outsides. 2 times 2 is 4. Multiply the insides. 3 times 3 is 9. Or 4 times 3, which is 12. So we're going to have 12 equals y. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and we're going to flip over to the second page here. All right, and then what we're going to pick up on this page, it's still the same thing, but our problems are going to get a touch more complex. Okay, so if we're looking here, let me zoom in here. So sometimes when we square both sides, so if I'm looking at this problem right here, we know that we've got to still isolate the square root. But when I'm going to square both sides, unfortunately over here, I've got a binomial, which means that squared means I have to write it out twice. So I'm going to have x minus 3 and x minus 3. Over here, the square and square root cancel. I'm going to have x plus 3. So on this right-hand side here, you're going to have to FOIL that out. So when you FOIL it, you're going to end up with x squared minus 6x plus 9 when you do all your work. Over here, we still have the x plus 3. Now, once you've done that, you're still going to, in this case, because you have that squared here, and we have a trinomial, you're going to have to do some factoring. So we're going to need to move the x plus 3 over to here first. So we're going to subtract the x off, subtract the 3 off. So those both cancel. So 0 equals x squared minus 7x plus 6. All right, so now at this point, we're going to factor that out. So factors of 6 that get us 7 would be 6 and 1, and then they both need to be negative. All right, so now you'll set each part equals 0. So x minus 6 equals 0, and you get 6. And then x minus 1 equals 0, so you get 1. The problem now is that you're going to get something that's called extraneous solutions. And basically that's a fancy way of saying we have extra answers. Some of them work and some do not. So once if you get more than one answer, if you get two answers here, you need to be checking your answers to see what works and what doesn't work. Okay, so sometimes we're going to get what's called extraneous solutions. And like I said, it's basically just extra answers that don't work. So we're going to go ahead and do your check, and a check will be a requirement from now on. Okay, so we're going to start with the 6. So I'm going to put 6 plus 3 in the radical equals 6 minus 3. Again, I'm just taking this and plugging it into the original equation. So we've got the square root of 9 equals 6 minus 3 is 3. Yes, that works. Okay, then we do the next one. So square root of 1 plus 3 equals 1 minus 3. So we end up with the square root of 4 equals negative 2. Now this is not going to work. The square root of 4 is going to equal positive 2. This does not work, so it's not an answer. So the only guy that's actually going to be an answer here will be x equals 6. All right, so let's come down here and try another one. Let's look on number 6 here real quick. Okay, so if I look at this, you still have the same rules. You still have to isolate. So we're still going to have to subtract the 3 off first. So I'm going to get radical of 10 minus 6k equals, and then on the other side I have k minus 3. Now you're still going to have to square both sides, and so since you've got a binomial, you're going to have to FOIL that out. So I have 10 minus 6k equals, and then I have k minus 3 and k minus 3. So when I FOIL that, it's going to be k squared minus 6k plus 9. So 10 minus 6k is still on the left side. Now we're still going to set equal to 0. So I'm going to move the 10 over, subtract it, and get a negative 1 here. I am going to add the 6 over, which is going to cancel out the 6's. So in reality, I just have k squared minus 1. That's a difference of squares, so we're back to factoring again. So we're going to have k minus 1 and k plus 1. So now when I set them equal to 0, k will equal positive 1 and k will equal negative 1. And so now we're back to, you got to check both answers. Okay, so you're always going to be showing a check on this. So I've got 10 minus 6 times 1, I'm doing the first problem, plus 3 equals 1. All right, well 10 minus 6 is 4, so the square root of 4 plus 3 is going to be 5. Square root of 4 is 2, so 2 plus 3 is 5. 5 equals 1. That does not work. So this is not an answer. So then we go to the next. Sorry. Okay, so then we go to the next one. So we've got 10 minus 6 times negative 1 plus 3. And that's going to equal negative 1. So we're going to end up with the square root of 16 plus 3 equals negative 1. So when I look at that, I know that there is no way that this guy right here is going to give me a negative 1. So this answer also does not work. So if you get two answers, I mean nothing that works, then your answer is going to be no solution. Okay. All right, that concludes the notes for lesson 10.4.